Saturday sprint races are coming to Formula 1, but plenty of people have concerns about the experiment, and you can count us among that group. 3 events this season will include a 100km qualifying race after team bosses and championship rulemakers unanimously agreed to try the new format. The so-called sprint qualifying plan will feature a normal qualifying session on Friday that sets the grid for a sprint race on Saturday. That Saturday race will then award points to the top 3 finishers and establish the grid for Sunday's Grand Prix. F1's plan is expected to be seen in action for the first time at the British Grand Prix. If you're among the many vocal opponents to this idea, please don't rush to hit the thumbs down button, maybe wait to hear us out first. Because we are going to explain how this works and why it's happening, but we'll also outline our own serious reservations about it. In addition to earning pole position for Sunday's Grand Prix, the sprint qualifying winner will receive 3 World Championship points. 2 points will be awarded to the second place finisher, while the driver in third receives 1 point. But the most interesting revelation is exactly how the weekend itself will work and the rules around it. A single 60-minute practice session will take place on Friday before qualifying in the afternoon, using the usual format but with only 5 sets of just the soft tyre available. On Saturday, another 60-minute practice session with just 1 set of tyres available will precede the qualifying race. Teams have 2 sets of tyres for Saturday's sprint race, but there's no mandatory pit stop and they're free to choose which compound they start on. Sunday's race will take place with the usual rule mandating 2 compounds are used, but like in the qualifying race, every driver will be able to choose their starting tyre, instead of like normal when the top 10 have to start with the tyre they used in Q2. Parc fermé conditions will apply from the start of Friday's qualifying session, which forbids the changing of major components for the rest of the weekend, but there will be enough room to reconfigure the cars in a way to make final practice on Saturday a useful session. Weight distribution and suspension elements can be adjusted after qualifying, as can engine and gearbox cooling if the ambient temperature before qualifying in the sprint race varies by 10 degrees Celsius or more. Cars will be in full parc fermé conditions after the qualifying race, but exceptions will be made in certain circumstances. For example, a team that has to replace a broken front wing but only has older spec spares can make that change without a penalty. In normal circumstances, that kind of change would necessitate a pit lane start. There are also a couple of specific rules in place if FP1 qualifying or the qualifying race are wet. If opening practice or qualifying is wet, teams will have an extra set of intermediates but must return a used set before the qualifying race. If the qualifying race is wet, teams can swap a set of used wet or intermediate tyres afterwards for a new set of inters. In addition to the British Grand Prix, the Italian Grand Prix is also expected to be used for this experiment. Brazil was the 3rd venue earmarked for the new format, but that hasn't been confirmed. The race is in doubt because of the COVID-19 pandemic, and F1 has plenty of time to commit to the final trial, which it wants to be towards the end of the season and outside of Europe. At its most simple level, this idea seeks to replace unpopular and more dull elements of the weekend and replace them with things people care more about. F1 sporting boss Ross Brawn, who has been pushing for a sprint qualifying race of some variety for years, said that the intention is to expand the whole weekend without cannibalising Sunday's race. Switching out second practice on a Friday for qualifying and adding a race on Saturday with teams tackling that with the serious incentive of some points and a grid position for the Grand Prix means the whole Grand Prix weekend theoretically gets a boost in terms of interest and value. It adds a 3rd focal point, and that's good news for F1's 3 main sources of income: event promoters, television broadcasters and fans. For those running a Grand Prix, selling Friday and Saturday tickets when that finally becomes a thing again should be a more successful enterprise, given the value of attending on those days is increased. It gives fans another reason to attend, it rewards them more for attending, and it puts more into the pockets of the promoters. Likewise, for the television broadcasters, selling viewers on qualifying instead of FP2 or teasing them with an extra race must be considered an uprated offering. Fans who fork out for TV subscriptions to watch Formula 1 or follow via F1 TV will be getting more competitive track action for their buck as well. So that's the arguments for, which we have no objection to. It's mostly commercially inspired, but what isn't these days, and there's nothing inherently offensive about it. But it's fair to question whether this will have any actual fundamental sporting or entertainment advantage beyond dedicating more track time to racing rather than practice. Only the biggest teams will be rewarded with points, so in reality that probably just bolsters Mercedes and Red Bull's tallies at the end of the year, helps their respective drivers, and over the season could result in the championship being decided sooner. It also dilutes the significance of Sunday's race because there's another way to score points. And if any of the big guns have a qualifying drama or an early setback in the sprint qualifying race, they have more time to make their way back to the front of the grid. F1's claim that it's going to spark more action and give teams chance to fight through for a better grid slot seems to have been plucked from thin air. That implies the slower teams that qualify further back are suddenly going to find ways to overtake faster cars. And with no mandatory pit stop and free starting tyre choice, nobody's likely to run out of rubber late on, and it's hard to see how anyone with a faster car is going to cede track position. We'll be happy to be proven wrong about this and believe it's right for F1 to trial such ideas instead of just blocking them for hypothetical reasons. We know it's also probably the only change that F1 could have implemented along these lines, given the teams have such a significant stake in the rule-making process. But while it means more time devoted to racing, how much racing will there actually be? Beyond adding a second race start into the mix, how much extra jeopardy is really being created? The teams and drivers will understand that risky moves could have serious consequences on the main part of the weekend, so they probably won't try them. Our underlying concern is that this is just adding a first stint to the Grand Prix on Saturday, then throwing a 24-hour red flag and restarting everything on Sunday afternoon. It's taken Formula 1 a long time to get to such an uninspiring and apparently unpopular idea. This plan started life back in 2019 as a proposal to have a reverse grid race on Saturdays, but that was blocked in 2020. This form of sprint qualifying emerged earlier in 2021 and had support from all 10 teams in principle very quickly. But financial implications were the main sticking point, as the biggest teams felt they were already making huge efforts to meet the first ever cost cap that's been implemented for this season. Mercedes and Red Bull had both voiced concerns that they had struggled to get beneath the budget cap, and the potential for damage from sprint races would cause wider ramifications as the amount of compensation being offered in advance wasn't sufficient. To allay those concerns, F1 and the FIA have agreed that teams will be able to spend a certain amount, believed to be around $500,000, on top of the budget cap to cover the cost of the free sprint qualifying races. There will also be a mechanism for additional claims to be made in the event of extra accident damage. Another concern over the idea was what it means for the weekend's race winners. The sprint qualifying name is designed to differentiate it from the Grand Prix officially, but some believe that's not going to matter when fans watch a Saturday race with a winner, especially as some points are being awarded as well. Mercedes boss Toto Wolff said that the Saturday race mustn't dilute the attraction of Sunday's Grand Prix, while his Red Bull counterpart Christian Horner said it should be treated almost like a pre-final and is made clear that a qualifying race winner isn't a Grand Prix winner. Brawn claims that's not going to happen, but that's like promising there are going to be no unintended consequences. We simply need to see these events take place to know for certain. But now you have an idea of how it's going to work and the arguments for or against. Let us know in the comments if you're in favour of this sprint qualifying experiment, or if you'd like F1 to have done something different. If you don't like the idea, but you do like us and you liked our video, hit us with a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't already, and we'll see you next time.